James Miller woke up before dawn, as he did every weekday. His alarm clock blinked for 30 a.m., and he reached over without opening his eyes to silence it. In the hush of his bedroom, he dressed in his uniform. The dark blue fabric felt familiar. Against his skin, straightened his badge, checked his radio, and took a deep breath. Outside, the first light of morning barely glowed on the horizon. He stepped into his kitchen, where a pot of coffee was waiting, the rich steam curling into the air. Down the hall, his wife Sarah stirred in bed. He poured 2 cups and set one on the nightstand. Sarah opened her eyes and offered a soft smile. "A long day ahead?" she asked. He nodded, and she reached over to pat his hand. Their son Tom was still asleep, the gentle rise and fall of his chest visible under the blankets. James paused to look at him. Tom was 18 and about to start college in a few weeks. He remembered when Tom was a boy, always asking questions about everything. Now he sensed a quiet confidence in his son. James grabbed his coffee and kissed Sarah's cheek. He moved as quietly as he could, not wanting to wake Tom. He slipped on his shoes and headed out the door. The city was still calm, birds whispering in the trees along his street. He locked the front door and climbed into his patrol car. The engine purred to life. Streetlights guided his way through empty roads. Even at this hour, there were a few late-night workers heading home. James waved as he passed them, a polite gesture born from years of routine. By 5:30 a.m., he arrived at the subway station. He stepped out and inhaled the sharp scent of the platform-brushed steel, old sweat, and a faint trace of hot pretzels from an early vendor. He greeted his fellow officers at the station entrance. They swapped nods and checked their gear. Station manager unlocked the turnstiles, and the first commuters began to trickle in. James leaned against a pillar, coffee in hand, listening to the distant rumble of the first train. A few minutes later, Maria Chen hurried down the street carrying her laptop bag. She was on her way to work at a small design firm downtown. The morning air was cool against her skin, and she pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. She liked the subway because she could read sketches in her mind as she rode. Today she pictured new logos and bright colors. The foot of the stairs. She paused to tie a shoelace. She noticed a few flyers fluttering in the breeze, advertising a jazz concert at a neighborhood club. She made a mental note to check it out one evening. Back inside the station, James watched the crowd grow, sipped his coffee, and scanned faces, some sleepy, some excited for the day ahead. A young mother balanced her toddler on her hip. Businessman in a crisp suit checked his watch. In the corner, a group of students laughed over shared headphones. James felt a steady sense of pride. He was here to keep them safe. He adjusted his cap and straightened his posture. Maria, having tied her shoelace, climbed the stairs 2 at a time. She hummed a soft tune under her breath, her mind weaving through work ideas. At the top, she glimpsed James through the railing. Their eyes briefly met. She offered him a friendly nod, and he returned it with a curt smile. But inside, he felt a flicker of annoyance. He thought she had cut in line. Although he wasn't quite sure, he brushed the thought away, reminding himself it was still early and he needed to stay sharp. The first train arrived with a hiss of air. Doors opened, and passengers spilled out like a slow-moving tide. James stepped forward and helped an older man with a cane onto the train. He felt useful in these small moments. Maria, noticing the crowd, waited for the next train, pulling her coat closer. She scanned the platform for space. In her hurry, she stepped onto the last stair a moment too soon, nearly missing a step. She caught herself and straightened up. A loud click told her the doors were closing. She broke into a light jog to reach them. But when she reached the platform's edge, she saw the doors shutting just past her. She sighed and headed back to the stairs. That's when James noticed her again. His chest tightened. He thought she had pushed past someone else. In truth, she had only stepped aside to let a group of passengers exit the train. But James's mind filled with a quiet frustration. He stepped toward her. "Hey," he called, his voice firm. Maria paused and looked up. "You can't just cut in line." Ow. Maria's eyes widened with surprise. "I was letting people exit," she said gently. Her voice was calm and clear. But James held up a hand as if he already knew everything. He reached for her arm. Maria froze, confused. "I'm sorry," she whispered. James's grip tightened. He pulled her forward with a sudden shove. Maria stumbled and fell down the concrete stairs. The sound of her body hitting each step echoed through the station. Commuters gasped. Some pulled out their phones. James rushed down after her. He helped her to her feet, but she could barely stand, her wrist bent at an odd angle, pain flashing. Across her face, tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't," she tried to say. James looked around at the witnesses and pressed his lips together. He called for backup and knelt beside her, trying to seem kind. A few officers arrived, concern in their eyes. James waved them off. "She attacked me," he insisted. Maria's vision blurred with tears. A small voice inside her asked, "Why? Is this happening?" She thought of her mother waiting for her call, of the design she needed to finish. She closed her eyes against the pain and wished for help. James stood and glanced at the cameras now rolling. He felt a tight knot in his chest. Part of him wondered if he had gone too far. Another part told him he was right to act. He turned back to the station manager and said, "Secure that video feed." The station manager's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Maria's story would not be told by the cameras, James decided. He would shape what people believed. As the ambulance siren approached, Maria lay on a stretcher, clutching her bag. A medic whispered soothing words. She tried to smile, masking the fear growing inside her. James watched from the top of the stairs, his badge gleaming under fluorescent lights. A single drop of doubt fell in his mind, but he brushed it away. Duty came first, he thought. Family came second. And sometimes, justice meant doing what others would not understand. Outside, Tom still slept, unaware of what had happened that morning. He would not know until he saw it online, a video that would change everything. But for now, the city hustled. On, the subway trains carrying hopes and dreams beneath the streets. And James Miller prepared for the next call, unaware of how quickly his own life was about to unravel. The moment the video of Maria's fall hit the internet, the city seemed to stop and watch. Early that afternoon, just hours after the subway incident, a news anchor hosted a live stream on social media. The clip showed Maria stumbling at the top of the stairs, then tumbling backward as Officer Miller's hand pushed her. Gasps and shouts echoed on the video. Within minutes, the clip had thousands of views. Comments poured in, some furious, calling for justice. Others defensive of the officer. The station buzzed with tension. Maria lay in a hospital bed, her arm in a sling and her wrist wrapped in white gauze. She stared at the ceiling, tracing the pattern of the tiles with her eyes. Every time she blinked, she saw that flash of movement, the harsh shove, the concrete steps, the crowd's shock. Her heart pounded. She remembered the pain that shot through her wrist and up her arm. A nurse checked her vitals and offered water. Maria sipped slowly, then closed her eyes. She knew the days ahead would be hard, but she felt a fierce determination to speak the truth. Across town, James Miller watched the same video with a tight jaw. He sat in his living room in full uniform, though he had come off duty an hour earlier. His partner at the precinct had called to warn him of the viral clip. Now he replayed it, frame by frame. He didn't see his own face clearly, but he heard the words "racist cop" in a headline that scrolled underneath. His chest tightened. With anger, he refused to believe he had done anything wrong. In his mind, Maria had disrespected him, and he had acted to protect order. Still, doubt crept in. At the police precinct, Internal Affairs opened a file on the case. Detective Lopez, known for her fair but firm manner, was assigned to review the incident. She arrived at the station early the next morning, her notebook in hand. She had watched the video countless times and jotted down every detail: the time, stamp, the location, the officers present. She then called the station manager of the subway to request the full security feed. In her heart, Lopez believed that every side deserved its truth. She also knew that power could shift quickly once a story like this went public. Meanwhile, the community reacted. A local activist group organized a peaceful protest outside the precinct. Dozens of people gathered, carrying signs that read "Justice for Maria" and "Stop Police Violence." They chanted her name and held candles. Word spread that evening, and the crowd swelled. Reporters interviewed Maria's friends and neighbors. She was described as kind, hard-working, someone who smiled at strangers on the street. The contrast between her gentle image and the violence of that shove fueled public outrage. Even people who rarely joined protests came to stand in solidarity. Back at home, Tom Miller sensed the shift before he saw it online. He overheard his mother, Sarah, talking in hushed tones with her sister on the phone. "I can't believe this is happening," she said. Tom's stomach lurched. He dropped his backpack and checked his phone. Notifications glowed, texts from friends asking if he had seen the video. He tapped the link and watched Maria's fall, feeling his own shock and shame. His father's hands on her arm, the push, the crowd's alarm. He could hardly believe what he saw. He felt a pang of betrayal. After school, Tom confronted his father in the garage where James was cleaning his patrol car. "Dad, what happened?" Tom asked, voice trembling. James paused his work, gloves in hand. He tried to explain calmly. "She cut in line, son. I did what I thought was right." Tom's eyes filled with tears. "She didn't cut. She was letting people off the train. You saw it. You pushed her." James sighed and shook his head. "The cameras lie. You're too young to understand how these things work." Throat tightened. He backed away and left the garage, slamming the door behind him. That night, Tom wandered the quiet streets near home and found himself at the subway station where it all happened. The lights were dim, and only a few late riders. Stood on the platform, he imagined Maria's fear as she fell, the pain in her wrist, the echo of her name in people's voices. He closed his eyes and whispered an apology to the empty tracks. He didn't know what to do next, but he felt certain he could not stay silent. Officer Miller faced his own challenges at the precinct the next day. His commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, called him into his office. Reynolds was a tall man with a stern face and a reputation for protecting his officers. He urged James to stick to his version of events. "Keep your story tight," Reynolds advised. "You need to control the narrative until this blows over." James nodded, though part of him recoiled at the thought of a cover-up. Still, he trusted Reynolds. He had never questioned orders before. Detective Lopez, meanwhile, met with Maria's lawyer in a small conference room. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Davis, presented medical reports and eyewitness statements. Showed photos of Maria's bruised arm and hospital bills. Lopez listened and took notes. She asked Davis to share any additional footage or photos from bystanders. Davis promised to gather everything. As Lopez left the meeting, she felt the weight of her duty. She would need to piece together the truth from all sides. On the evening news, a local reporter interviewed Maria's roommate, Lena. Lena described Maria's gentle nature, how she always brought home fresh fruit for neighbors and volunteered on weekends at a community art class. The reporter then cut to footage of the protest outside the precinct. The anchor's voice sounded urgent. Community members demand accountability as video evidence mounts against Officer Miller. That voice felt heavy to James when he watched it at home. His hands trembled as he held a mug of cold coffee. He wondered if his career, his reputation, and his family would survive this storm. At college orientation that weekend, Tom sat in a circle with new classmates. A counselor asked everyone to introduce themselves and share why they chose their field of study. When it was Tom's turn, he spoke softly. "My name is Tom Miller. I'm planning to study criminal justice because I want to make a difference." A girl next to him raised an eyebrow. "How come?" she asked. Tom hesitated, then decided to be honest. "There's a case in my city where an officer hurt someone unjustly. I want to learn how to fix a broken system." The room fell silent. Tom's voice carried a resolve he had not felt before. Back in the precinct, the investigation continued. Lopez studied transcripts of interviews with officers who were on duty that day. Some claimed they didn't see the shove. Others said they were in the break room. Lopez noted every inconsistency. She also pored over social media posts. One bystander had uploaded a slow-motion clip that showed the shove more clearly. Lopez saved it to her folder. She felt both frustration and hope. frustration at the lies she would uncover, and hope that the truth could still matter. One morning, a letter arrived at the precinct from the subway authority. It confirmed that security protocols had failed and that some camera angles were missing. The main stairwell camera had worked, and the footage was clear. Private contractors were now reviewing the full feed. Captain Reynolds asked Lopez for an update. She told him the video was decisive and that disciplinary action would be recommended. Reynolds' face tightened, but he offered Lopez a curt nod. The ripple of official movement had begun. Meanwhile, Maria prepared for her day at a rehabilitation center. Her arms still throbbed, and crutches cued every step, yet she walked with her head held high. She met a physical therapist named Anna, who encouraged her progress. "You're doing great," Anna said, adjusting an exercise band around Maria's hand. Maria smiled, thinking of all the people who stood with her. She said to Anna, "I just want to get back to living my life." Anna nodded. "We'll help you every step of the way." At home that night, Tom packed a box of his things, told his mother softly, "I need to move out for a while." Sarah's eyes filled. With tears, "Tom, please, let's talk about this." Tom shook his head. "I can't stay under the same roof where truth is dismissed." Sarah reached out, but Tom backed away. He left his room and closed the door gently. Sarah heard the latch click and stood frozen, her hand hovering in the air. She whispered his name, but Tom was already gone. In the weeks that followed, the city watched as the investigation unfolded. Public pressure mounted. Captain Reynolds placed James on administrative leave. The department announced an internal hearing. Maria filed a civil suit. Protesters held weekly vigils, and Tom, living with a friend, began volunteering at the advocacy group that had supported Maria. He felt a sense of purpose and pain in equal measure. Every day he carried the memory of that video and the knowledge that one moment of injustice could change many lives forever. The video kept playing in everyone's mind. After the clip of Maria Chen tumbling down the stairs spread across social media, outrage grew like wildfire. People stopped their daily routines to watch it again and again. News outlets ran the scene on loop, each replay sharpening the sense of shock. In homes and cafes, strangers leaned in to whisper about what they had seen. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others clenched their fists in anger. The city's morning newspaper splashed bold headlines. "Justice for Maria, an officer under fire." Even late-night talk shows debated the shove and the racial question beneath it. Maria's family rallied quickly. At her small apartment, her older brother Ken paced the living room floor while her mother sat on the sofa, carefully wrapping a cool pack around Maria's swollen wrist. Maria watched them from her recliner, her eyes tired but determined. She listened as Ken spoke to reporters on the phone, arranging interviews and sharing his sister's side of the story. He described Maria's gentle nature, how she always helped neighbors carry groceries and volunteered at her church kitchen on Sundays. Their mother, voice trembling, spoke to anyone who would listen about how her daughter deserved respect and a safe city commute. Family friends arrived with home-cooked meals and cards. Maria realized she was not alone. At the subway authority's office, the head of security met with internal affairs investigators. The authorities' lawyers expressed concern, warning that if the video showed clear wrongdoing, the city could face a costly lawsuit. They traced the exact chain of command that morning. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, Captain Reynolds gathered his lieutenants in a small, windowless room. He spoke in low, urgent tones about the need to protect the department's reputation. He reminded them that officers faced danger every day and deserved the public's support. Any suggestion that James Miller had acted out of bias, he said, would harm every officer on the force. Reynolds urged his team to prepare statements, log reports, and coordinate with the station manager who controlled the video feeds. Internal Affairs Detective Lopez felt the weight of every accusing glance. She spent long hours reviewing the station security tapes, confirming that the stairwell camera had captured every moment of Maria's fall. She pored over witness statements from commuters who had rushed to help. Maria, one older man had offered his scarf to keep her warm. Another had called 911, their voices. heard on the recording contradicted James's claim that Maria had attacked him first. Lopez noted these discrepancies in her report. She also interviewed the station manager, who revealed that a few camera angles farther down the stairs had been overwritten to save space. Unexpected error, he called it. Lopez filed that detail, knowing it raised more questions than answers. As media coverage intensified, a grassroots group organized daily protests outside the police precinct. On the first day, a handful of people stood quietly, holding candles and signs. By the third day, hundreds had arrived, chanting Maria's name and calling for the officer's suspension. Local clergy joined with pastors from different faiths, calling for peace, but insisting on accountability. Maria's face appeared on flyers passed hand to hand. Her calm smile contrasted sharply with the bruise forming under her eye. Many wore shirts bearing her image and the words "Stand with Maria." Their voices echoed off the concrete walls of the precinct. Drivers slowed to honk in support as they passed by. Inside his home, James Miller felt the walls closing in. His uniform hung untouched in the closet as he sat at the kitchen table with his wife Sarah. Newspaper clippings lay spread out before him. Sarah poured him a cup of tea. She tried to speak gently, reminding him that he could still tell the truth and possibly regain some trust. But James's jaw tightened. He insisted that he acted in good faith, keeping order on a crowded platform. Mai warned Sarah that admitting fault now could end his career. Sarah listened, worry shadowing her face. She thought of their son Tom, away at orientation, and feared how this crisis would change their family forever. Meanwhile, Maria's lawyer, Ms. Davis, filed a formal complaint with the city's Civil Rights Commission. She gathered evidence: hospital bills, the security footage, witnesses' testimonies. She sent letters to every city council member, demanding hearings and swift action. She worked late into the night drafting legal briefs and collecting signed statements from commuters who had seen the shove. Each statement painted a clear picture. Maria had not blocked anyone. She had shown kindness by stepping aside for exiting passengers. Each note reinforced the charge of excessive force and racial bias. City council members read the complaint and debated whether to form a special committee. Local newspapers printed op-eds calling for change in police training and stronger oversight. Some columnists argued that a single officer's failure should not define the whole force. Others insisted that systemic issues of bias ran deeper, and that this moment could be a turning point. Talk radio hosts invited callers to weigh in. Some defended James, praising his years of service. Others condemned him, warning that without consequences, similar incidents would continue. On a quiet Wednesday morning, Captain Reynolds called a press briefing. He stood behind a podium flanked by uniformed officers. He expressed concern for Maria's injuries and promised a thorough and fair investigation. He said the department valued transparency and would cooperate with internal affairs. But he also reminded listeners that officers faced daily dangers and that judgments should wait until all facts were known. Reporters pounced on his words, some praising his balance, others accusing him of stonewalling. That same morning, Detective Lopez delivered her preliminary report to the police chief. She laid out the timeline, the video timestamp, the statements from bystanders, the station manager's admission about missing footage. She recommended suspending Officer Miller while the investigation continued. The chief nodded thoughtfully but said he needed to consult with the city attorney. Lopez walked back to her desk, wondering how long it would take for truth to matter. More than politics. As weeks passed, pressure mounted from every direction. Maria's family, activists, media, faith leaders, and even some within the department who felt uneasy about the cover-up. Maria attended a city council meeting in a wheelchair, her cast still on her arm. She spoke quietly before the room fell silent. She told her story without anger, describing the pain in her wrist and the shock of being pushed for no reason. She asked simply for fairness and accountability. Council members listened, some with tears in their eyes. In the private space of his study, James Miller stood before his bookshelf, fingers tracing the spines of old case files. He felt the weight of every decision he had made. He wondered if the line between right and wrong had blurred. He thought of Maria's face in the video and his own son's disappointment. He reached for the phone, ready to call Captain Reynolds for guidance. At that moment, a small voice inside him whispered that the truth might still be the only way. Forward, he hesitated, the hours stretching in silence around him, torn between loyalty and conscience. ChatGPT said, Tom woke early that Saturday, the sky still silver with dawn light. He felt a tight knot in his chest as he dressed in simple jeans and a gray sweatshirt. The house was quiet. His mother's coffee maker whispered in the kitchen. Downstairs, he paused at his bedroom door, listening for any sign of his father. But there was only the soft hum of the refrigerator. Tom slipped out and left the house, the front door clicking softly behind him. He walked to the subway station, the place where everything had started. The stairs were empty now, but he remembered how they had felt under his feet the morning of the incident. He gripped the railing and let his mind drift back to Maria's fall, her shock. The pain in her eyes, the way people gasped around her. He felt sadness and anger mixed together, like two heavy stones in his heart. He closed his eyes and gave a silent promise to himself. He would stand for what was right. A small group of people gathered at the bottom of the stairs, holding candles, and wearing shirts with Maria's face on them. There was a gentle energy in the air, quiet, respectful, determined. Tom joined them, taking a candle from a volunteer who gave him a grateful nod. The group formed a circle around the stairwell, their voices soft as they spoke Maria's name, then fell silent. The glow of the candles lit up their faces, each one reflecting hope and sorrow. Tom stepped forward when a local pastor invited anyone to share their thoughts. He held his candle close, the flame flickering in his hands. My name is Tom Miller, he began, voice steady but soft. This morning I stand here not just as someone who loved his father, but as someone who believes in truth. He looked toward the stairs. I believe that Maria did nothing wrong that day. I believe that a single shove can change a life forever, and I believe that we must choose compassion over power, always. He paused, seeing heads nod in agreement. The crowd murmured softly in support. After the vigil ended, Tom stayed behind to help clean up. He stacked chairs, gathered empty water bottles, and folded signs. A young woman approached him and handed him a cup of hot tea. Thank you for speaking today, she said. Tom smiled. Tiredly, I just spoke what I felt, he answered. She nodded, her eyes kind. It takes courage to stand up, especially when it's your own family involved. Tom's throat tightened. He thought of his father, of the conversations they'd had. He wondered if his father would ever understand. Later that afternoon, Tom went to the small apartment where he had been staying with his friend Marcus. Marcus lived nearby with his parents. They welcomed Tom with open arms, a hot meal waiting on the table. As they ate, Marcus said gently, You did the right thing today, man. Tom nodded across the table. I hope so. I just can't live in a place where truth is silenced. He thought of his father's words about loyalty and duty. The words felt hollow. That evening, news outlets covered the vigil, showing Tom's face as he spoke. James saw the clip on his tablet while sitting alone in the living room. Room was dim, the blinds drawn tight. He tapped the screen, pausing on Tom's image. He remembered Tom's voice, soft but clear, calling out his father's actions. Something in James's chest tightened. He swallowed hard, feeling both pride and guilt. He shut the tablet and stood, pacing the room. The next day, Tom returned home to collect a few things. He walked up the front path and paused before the door. He heard voices inside, his mother sobbing softly and his father speaking in low tones. Tom's heart pounded. He pushed the door open and found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, a tissue in her hand. James stood beside her, his uniform laid across a chair. He looked older, drawn, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Tom stepped in. I'm here to get my things, he said quietly. Sarah looked up, tears in her eyes. Tom. Please, Tom held up a hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't stay. He moved past her into his old room. He opened his closet and pulled out a few shirts and his favorite jacket. He packed them into a duffel bag, took a final look around posters of his college team, books on his desk, family photos on the wall. Each memory felt like a thread pulling him back, but he resisted. When his bag was full, Tom turned back to the doorway. His father stood there, arms crossed. They stared at each other in silence. Finally, James spoke. "Aunt, don't do this. You're my son." His voice cracked. Tom felt tears sting his eyes. "I'm still your son," he said softly. "But I can't live with lies. I need to find my own path." James ran a hand through his hair, despair in his eyes. "If you leave, we may never find our way back." Tom shook his head. "Maybe. That's how it has to be." He walked out the door, leaving the house and his past behind. In the days that followed, Tom focused on his studies and activism. He attended classes and volunteered at the community center that supported victims of injustice. He mentored young students, sharing his own story of standing up for what is right. He spoke at school assemblies about truth and courage. Each time he spoke, his voice grew stronger, the fear inside him slowly dissolving. James, meanwhile, faced the turmoil of his own decisions. He was suspended from the force and awaited an internal hearing. His former colleagues avoided him in the station halls. The station manager no longer greeted him with a nod. He spent his days at home, replaying the morning of the incident over and over in his mind. He found himself questioning the order he had tried so hard to keep. He reached out to Maria's lawyer, offering to tell his side honestly. But when he heard her voice on the phone, poised and firm, he hung up without a word. One night, James couldn't sleep. He walked down the dark street to the subway stairs. He paused at the top and looked down. The same steps where Maria had fallen now stood empty, bathed in pale light. He traced the path she had taken that day. He remembered her whispered apology, the fear in her eyes. He felt a deep regret, as if a cold wind had cut through him. Closed his eyes and whispered, "I am sorry," though he knew she could not hear. Sarah tried to reach out to her husband. She invited him to therapy, to talk with a counselor together. At first, James refused. "This is something I have to face alone," he said. But after days of silence, he agreed to meet. In the counselor's simple office, they sat on soft chairs. The counselor asked James to share his feelings. He spoke, haltingly, admitting for the first time that he regretted his actions. Sarah placed her hand over his. He felt a warmth, a bridge forming between them again. He realized he needed their family to heal. Meanwhile, Maria continued her recovery. Her wrist healed slowly, the cast finally removed after weeks. She returned to work part-time, sketching logos and designs with her left hand supporting her right. She spoke at city forums about empathy and respect, her calm voice offering gentle guidance. Communities began to discuss better training for officers, programs for dialogue between police and residents. Maria's story inspired small changes, and she felt hopeful. Tom visited Maria once at the community center. He brought her flowers and thanked her for inspiring him. Maria reached out and hugged him. "Keep speaking your truth," she said. "You are the future." Tom nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Weeks turned into months. James prepared for his hearing, reviewed his testimony, and decided he would finally tell the full truth. He wrote a letter of apology to Maria, expressing his remorse and offering to help in any way he could. He folded the letter carefully and sealed it in an envelope. He didn't know if she would read it, but he knew he had to send it. On the morning of the hearing, James wore a clean suit instead of his uniform. He felt both dread and relief as he walked into the hearing room. Across from him sat Maria's lawyer, defenders of justice, and the internal affairs panel. James took a deep breath and spoke clearly, admitting his mistakes and acknowledging his bias. The room fell silent. He did not excuse his actions. He simply stated the truth. Outside the courthouse, Tom and Sarah waited. When the hearing ended, they saw James and Maria exit together, talking quietly. Maria held the apology letter in her hand. They walked toward Tom and Sarah on the sidewalk. Tom's heart pounded as he watched them approach. James looked at his son and offered a small, hopeful smile. Tom stepped forward, and they embraced. It was not a complete fix, but it was a start, a new beginning, built on honesty and forgiveness. James Miller stood outside the small hearing room on a brisk morning, the sunlight just peeking over the city's skyline. His palms were damp, and he smoothed his suit jacket again and again. He remembered the day he shoved Maria Chen down those stairs, the roar of the crowd, and the sharp pain in her arm. He carried that memory like a heavy stone in his chest. Now he faced a panel of investigators, lawyers, and community representatives who would decide his fate. Inside, Maria Chen sat, with calm dignity. Her wrist was fully healed, but she still felt a stubborn ache when she moved her hand too fast. She wore a simple dress in soft blue, the color of a clear sky. Maria had spent the past months sharing her story at city forums and in local schools. She spoke gently about respect, empathy, and the strength needed to stand up against injustice. Today she would listen and watch as James told his side of the story. Tom Miller arrived early and took a seat near the back of the room. He had grown taller since their last meeting and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found a purpose. He studied the faces around him. Some looked sympathetic toward Maria, others reserved toward James. But Tom felt hope. He believed that truth had power, and that day it would be heard. When the doors opened, James walked in slowly. His heart pounded with each step. He remembered how different things had been before the incident, before the video, before the protests, before his son left home. Now every eye in the room seemed to focus on him. He took a deep breath and approached the witness stand, offering a polite nod to the panel. His voice trembled as he began. "I am Officer James Miller," he said. "I deeply regret my actions on the morning of March 15th, when I saw Ms. Chen on the platform. I believed she had broken protocol. I acted in anger and fear, not in justice." His words felt heavy in the still air. He paused to steady himself before continuing. "I did not consider her feelings or her right to a safe commute. I caused her harm, and for that I am truly sorry." Maria listened with quiet eyes. She heard the sincerity in his voice and felt a small shift in her chest. Though her own pain had been immense, she valued honesty above all. She had asked for a fair investigation, not revenge. As James spoke, she saw a man struggling with his conscience. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and whispered, "Thank you." The panel asked questions about training, about steps he would take to prevent bias in the future, and about how he planned to rebuild trust. James answered openly, admitting that he needed better understanding of community concerns. Said he wanted to join bias awareness workshops and volunteer for outreach programs. He promised to dedicate himself to rebuilding bridges between the force and the people it served. When the hearing ended, the room filled with quiet conversation. Some members offered Maria words of comfort. Others spoke to officers about new policies. Tom joined his father and mother in the hallway. Sarah's eyes glistened with relief. She reached for James's hand. Maria passed by, and James took a cautious step forward, letter in hand. He extended it to her with a soft, "This is for you." Maria unfolded the paper carefully. Her eyes scanned his words. An apology for the pain he caused, a promise to support her and her community, and a request for forgiveness. Maria's lips curved in a gentle smile. She looked up at James and simply said, "I accept your apology. Let us work together for change." Tearful relief filled both of their eyes. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters buzzed. Maria walked down the steps with James at her side. Tom and Sarah joined them, forming a small circle of family and survivor. A photographer captured the moment. A man who had caused harm, a woman who had endured it, and a son who had held both accountable. The image would appear in the morning papers, symbol of accountability and hope. In the weeks that followed, James began attending community meetings. He listened more than he spoke. He learned about people's daily struggles and the history of mistrust between neighborhoods and law enforcement. Maria Cole led workshops with him, sharing her perspective and guiding discussions on empathy. Together, they taught simple exercises in respectful communication. Participants practiced active listening, acknowledging each other's experiences without interruption or judgment. Tom threw himself into mentoring at a youth center near the subway station. He helped students with homework and organized art, projects about justice and unity. He told them his own story, how speaking the truth had cost him his home, but had given him something more valuable: integrity. Under his guidance, the students painted a mural on the center's wall showing subway stairs, transforming into a bridge of hands reaching out to each other. Sarah found solace in volunteering at a local food pantry, where she met families facing hardship. She used her own experience of loss and reconciliation to comfort others. She spoke kindly to anxious parents and shared lessons on forgiveness. In the pantry's bright hall, she often found herself telling new friends how a family had nearly broken apart but had become closer through honesty. Maria's work expanded beyond city borders. She was invited to speak at neighborhood forums across the state, sharing her journey from victim to advocate. She described how healing could come through dialogue, and how every person, no matter their role, could choose understanding over hostility. Her talks were simple, her words clear, and her message powerful. People must see each other's humanity. James continued to serve in a new role as a community liaison officer. He wore plain clothes now, not a uniform, and carried no weapon. His job was to build relationships, not enforce rules. He organized coffee chats with residents, attended neighborhood picnics, and joined community basketball games. He practiced the art of listening, asking questions, and admitting when he did not have the answers. Tom visited his family home one evening, walking down the same path that once felt like a trap. He entered through the front door and saw a photo. On the hallway table, himself, Maria, and James, all smiling together after the hearing. He felt a warm glow in his chest. He hugged his mother, who pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. He turned to his father, whose eyes showed pride and a hint of tears. They stood in silence, connected by the journey they had shared at the subway. Station one crisp morning, Maria and Tom met again. They sat on a bench near the top of the stairs, watching commuters stream past. Maria pointed out the bright mural on the station wall, the children's hands reaching across the gap. She said, "This makes me hopeful." Tom nodded. "It shows that change can start small." Maria smiled and tapped her watch. "I have to get to work, but I'll see you at the youth center?" Tom stood and offered her his arm. "Always." James watched them from a distance, standing at the bottom of the stairs. He saw Maria's confident stride and Tom's supportive presence. In that moment, he understood the true meaning of service, to protect not just lives, but dignity and trust. He raised a silent salute to the two he cared about most. They paused, turned, and waved back. The city moved forward, buses rumbling, trains gliding. Underground, people living their stories. But in one corner of the downtown station, a small mural in the memory of a once painful moment now pointed the way to compassion. The subway stairs no longer felt like a place of danger, but a symbol of the steps we each must take toward understanding. Maria walked down those stairs with her head held high. Tom walked beside her with hope in his heart, and James stood at the bottom ready to take every step with them.